Good morning. Hand today is going to be 7-6 offsuit. A 5 NL game. Gonna see some crazy hands, I'm sure. So under the gun limps, I fold, and then we get our first raise. Under the gun limper, um, he's playing 28-18. It looks like early position, he's limped, he's raised, but when you see pre-flop raise at 18 and VPIP at 28%, I think he generally raises when he's going to play. So that kind of tells me that he's probably on like a speculative type hand, something like this. Because I would assume that all these better hands would have raised first in. It's not going to matter a whole lot because he is going to fold pre-flop. But I think when you have a player that usually raises and then all of a sudden limps, it's something like a low pocket pair or some of these low connectors, suited connectors or one gappers, or maybe even like the mid ace. We don't know if he's going to raise ace 2 to ace 5 or not, but we throw him in. So then this next guy raises. He's playing 36-14. We only have 14 hands on him, so we don't have a whole lot. He is early position. He's played 25%, so 1 out of 4 and 1 out of 3 times he's raised first in. So the question is, what is he raising? I just gave him kind of like a standard raise. At 36-14 out of 14 hands, I'm going to assume that he's just going to be fairly strong. So I think this is probably a decent range. Don't know if it needs to be wider or narrower, but I think that's a starting point. All right, so after he raises, we get a total of 3 callers, and then the original limper folds. So we're going to go to the first caller, 31-17. We have 154 hands on him, about 150. He's in mid position, 21% of hands. Looks like he plays, it's a little inverse, so he plays like early position almost as frequently, or more frequently, technically, as when he's on the button. He does 3-bet, and our notes are that he 3-bets queens. So I'm going to assume queens plus ace king is a good 3-betting range. But we know he's going to be playing. He's probably not going to be 3-betting a whole lot. When we look at mid position, he calls 2-bet 36% of the time, calls any 3-bet 100% of the time. So I put together a range like this. This is almost 23%. Suited aces, Broadway hands, pocket pairs. Maybe he's a little wider, but I think this gets a, generally speaking, I think this tends to be a calling hand. It's hands that players like to play, but not strong enough for them to 3-bet. All right. Button calls. We only have 16 hands, and he's played 6% of hands. It's not much, so basically 1 out of 16. We're going blind with this player, so typically I'm going with a player that's only played 1 out of 16. Normally a looser player probably would have played 3 or 4 hands already, maybe even 5 or 6. This guy probably hasn't really played a whole lot, so I'm going to give him much stronger range. So Broadway hands, all pocket pairs, just some suited connectors. So we're down to only about 15%. I did assume queens plus ace king would raise. Big blinds playing 31-6, so big difference. We do have a note on this player. So 3-bet range, king, ace king suited and aces. So I mean that's about all we know. But this player has a wide gap between his VPIP and his pre-flop raise, 31-6. It's only out of 16 hands again, but we do have a note here where he checks 3 limpers and he checks behind after 3 limpers with the king 5 off, and then he's out of position 4-way and he bets 1, bets 1, bets 1. So we've seen this player probably recently. Flop comes down king 7-3, and he just keeps betting 1 with a top pair weak kicker. So knowing that, I think he could have a lot of hands here. I'm going to give him all the offsuit aces as well. Suited aces, suited kings. It's possible that he may have the offsuit kings as well, but we're going to assume queens plus ace king would have been a 3-bet. All right, and then this guy folds. So we go to a flop 4-way, and it comes king queen 2 with 2 diamonds. So this should be hitting this guy pretty good. Not surprised by the check. He bets 8, which is half pot. I think his c-bet stat, we don't have a whole lot of information on here, but we can go with probably sets top pair, middle pair maybe. I could see him do that. I think flush draw, open ender is probably in his betting range. I mean, this is a pretty good flop for him. That's if he's being pretty honest, pretty truthful. Even the queens, so we're dealing with ace, queen, queen, jack, queen, 10. I think with the queens, he bets. If he gets called, he's probably just checking those behind. I don't think he'll fire twice with those, but 53% is probably pretty good of a range. And we get one caller, so this guy folds, and this guy folds. So this guy calls. He doesn't raise, so that's kind of surprising. So sets in 2 pair, I'm going to set at 50%. I kind of assumed that they would raise at this point because of the diamonds. However, when you're dealing with the lower stake player, I do think that some players, some of the newer players, more inexperienced players, or even some of the players that were like playing 10, 20 years ago, would take trips in 2 pair and basically just call on the flop to make sure the diamond doesn't come out on the turn. And then on the turn, that's when they wake up with their raise. And that's when they surprise you. So I'm going to say we don't know what kind of player that is. I think newer players, better players will probably raise at this point because they would be raising some of their flush draws and their straight draws as well to balance against the trips and the 2 pairs, which is what we should be doing. So I'm going to say 50% of the time they just call with those. I think top pair probably just calls. I think middle pair is going to call here as well. I can't imagine pocket pair below the second card is going to call, but fold the c-bet stat. 0 out of 9, he is not folded to a flop c-bet in position. He's called down basically almost all the way. Wow, so maybe he does call with these lower pocket pairs, hopes to hit trips. We're going to say flush draw he's calling, open ender he's calling. We're going to give him the gut shot that he's calling. That's 75%. I mean, that's and maybe he calls with 100% because he just doesn't want to be bullied off the hand. I don't know. I think we're going to go just with that range. Turns a 4. All right, villain checks now. Now, once he checks, I'm eliminating sets 2 pair, over pair, top pair. Although we'll leave like king 10 in his range, maybe even king jack. We'll do 50% king jack, just because he's scared of like a king queen, which is possible. But middle pair is definitely in there. I would think he would continue with the flush draw and with the open ender. Continue betting. But I could be wrong. So right now he's looking very strongly like he has a queen. Villain 1 checks behind at this point. Sets in 2 pair I think are out. I think top pair I would probably assume he would have bet. Middle pair, I think all of the weak pair, I think everything else he's basically just calling. So I'm going to make sure that those are out. The good cards are out. All right, then we go to a river, 3 of hearts. Villain 8 checks again. No big surprise. I think he's check calling with the kings, possibly check calling with the queens. Villain 1 checks behind. So player in position. At this point, I can't imagine sets or straights are just checking here. I can't even imagine top pairs checking. So we're looking at middle pair or worse. So let's just kind of get those narrowed down. And then we see a showdown. So 10 Jack of hearts, he did have the open ender, and he chose not to continue betting it. I think that was a mistake. I think he probably should have continued betting this. 4 doesn't really change anything, but I think you're continuing betting your 2 pair, your trips. You're continuing with your top pair hand. You're continuing with your diamond draws, and you're gonna have to balance off all of your other all of your good hands with draws. So I think Jack 10's a pretty decent one, just because you're open ended. Obviously, it would have been a whole lot better if this 4 was a heart. So if the 3, this was a 4 of hearts and this was a 3 of spades, that'd be a whole lot better. This guy has Queen 9. That's definitely in his range. I guess I'm a little shocked that he didn't continue betting the turn, but regardless, it's one of those hands where he did bet his open ender, and then I assumed that he was going to continue betting barreling on the turn. So let's get some notes on here. So he was technically mid position. So he ISO raised 4 big blinds in MP with Jack 10 of hearts. 4-way MP. So he bet 50%, then check on. Get the boards. King, diamonds, queen of diamonds, 2 of hearts, 4 spades, 3 of hearts. Alright, and we'll copy that. And let's add this player. So he call 4 big blind, ISO raise. He actually MP is hijack. Queen 9 of spades. A 4-way mid position. Alright. So I don't mind how he played as much. Not really a fan of the calling pre-flop. You've got a limper, then you've got an ISO raise. You're in the hijack. Queen 9 probably could call, let's say button, maybe. So we can look at this hijack versus low jack. You can see Queen 9's not in a calling range. It's technically not in the calling range for, in the GTO play. If we go to the button versus mid position, you see it doesn't really go in there. Again, we can expand it if we're going to be play exploitatively. So if we think villain's like way too wide, we can start to expand our range as well. But I don't really care for his call pre-flop. On the flop, I don't mind the call at all. You've got second pair. I think there's a lot of hands that this villain could play. But as soon as the turn goes check, I think he needs to attack. Because I don't think you really want an ace to fall. I don't think you really want a diamond to fall. And you can also go for a little bit of value. If he's on the diamond draw, or if he has 10 jack like he does, I think he's going to call another bet. So, you're not technically just bluffing, which you are when you don't have anything. Like if you call with your under pairs, this is a great spot to bluff on the turn. Try to buy the equity of the pot. And if you're going to do that with bluffs, you have to have some value hands. And I think Queen 9 could be a value hand like that. You're getting called by worse. You're getting called by draws. And then you bet, and he calls, and then you just check behind and take your showdown value hand to take the pot. So I think that's kind of his problem. Other than calling, I think he missed out on that turn bet. He would have gotten called, but he would have also made a little bit more. So if we go back to the turn, pot's 34.6. He goes check. You could easily go up to let's see here. What's 2/3 pot? Heck, you can go 25 big blinds here at 25 and get called, and then just check behind. This player, I think, should have continued betting the turn. But I will say, I think this is probably, I think once we get to the turn, we have to start reducing our C bet or our barreling frequency. I think 10 Jack could be a hand where you do check behind a little bit. It could be a mixed strategy, so some of the time you bet, some of the time you check. If he bets, will Queen 9 fold? Based on these stats, probably not. I bet he's gonna call with his one pair hands down. So, exploitatively, I think the bet's okay. On C bet is probably okay, and then you could probably check to save on money because you have to assume he's probably going to be calling again on the turn. So you can kind of get and if you know he's not gonna get a float, you'll make that float bet. So yeah, he hasn't yet, but he has on the flop. Then you might save a little bit of money. So those are the hands. It's 5 NL, so it's a little bit harder. Maybe I should restrict it to like 25 NL. Start working on better player hand reading. But that's what we have. So hopefully you enjoy this. If you do, look tomorrow for our next hand.